Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of This Week in History. I'm Alexandra Schneider. Thanks again for tuning in. This week in 1923, with the sale of the George Lyon store in Waukegan, the Anderson Brothers store in Lake Forest became the oldest store in Lake County that existed in respect to single-family ownership. In 1863, the late James Anderson had established a store on the property where, during the time this article was written, the new Methodist church was being constructed. However, at that time, many residents took issue with the store's location. They had moved up from Chicago to avoid a business district near their schools, homes, and churches. In response, Anderson's store moved to the opposite side of the train tracks on Western Avenue. A little bit more on James Anderson himself, who was an interesting and important figure in early Lake Forest history. When Anderson and his wife Mary moved to Lake Forest in the 1850s, they were amongst the first new residents to the newly established community. In addition to starting a lumber and materials yard as well as his general store, Anderson was also responsible for bringing in the first herd of purebred Angus cattle from Scotland to the Lake Forest area. And in 1928, the new Deerpath Theatre celebrated its grand opening and played to capacity audiences throughout the holiday weekend. The Lake Forester commended the architects Anderson and Ticknor for achieving a theater that lacked the ostentatious nature of many other theaters at the time, but instead was simple and tasteful. The Polka brothers, who owned and operated a string of theaters throughout the Chicago area, offered a well-selected list of films for the opening weekend, including Steamboat Bill featuring Buster Keaton and The Hunchback of Notre Dame with Lon Chaney. While the theater had several managers throughout its time in the area, for many years, it was overseen by Joseph and Amelia Emma, whose daughter Rosemarie watched films in that theater before heading off to Hollywood stardom herself as actress Joan Taylor. And finally, in 1931, construction began on a new brick and concrete fireproof building for the Lake Bluff Orphanage. The structure was to house the preschool children who had outgrown the nursery but were still too small to join the big kids. The building was a gift of the Swift family and was to be known as the Anne M. Swift Memorial Hall. Plans for the structure were drawn up by architect Edward A. Shiwee, who had also drawn plans for the Swift Memorial Health Center. The new orphanage building included a large living room with a natural fireplace, a dining room, a common kitchen, storage rooms for the many toys and clothing that the children needed, and dormitories which were unique in that the children were actually given their own semi-private rooms. There you have it. That's This Week in History. Thank you so much for joining me, and be sure to check out the History Center website for more great content.